today we are incredibly grateful and pleased to welcome Fearn Lickfield to the Quantum Healing Collective. Fearn is a web weaver, a fairy seer, earth diviner, temple tender, and magical activist. She's the director and head teacher of the Green Mountain Druid School and chief of the Green Mountain Druid Order. She co-creates community celebrations in honor of the earth and waters and the seasons. Fearn is the steward of Dreamland, a sanctuary and mystery school in Worcester, Vermont. With great amounts of gratitude, personally and collectively, welcome Fearn to the Quantum Healing Collective.
Thank you, Angela. It's lovely to see your face again. It's been quite a while. Yeah, thanks for having me. And blessed Imbolc to everyone. We're just almost at that tipping point. And for those who don't know, it's actually pronounced Imolc. The B is silent if you're speaking in Old Irish, which is where that word comes from. But yeah, so it's this time of the tipping point, the halfway point between the beginning and the end of winter. And as Druids, we honor the wheel of the year, which I often describe as a pie with 8 slices. I actually made some pumpkin pie recently, and so I've been enjoying a lot of pie in my life. But think of a 8 sliced pie, and think of the axis this way. So you have to turn your pie on its side. The axis this way is the summer and winter solstices, actually winter and summer, and then the axis this way is the equinoxes, autumn and spring. And then each of the cross quarters are those places halfway in between a solstice and an equinox. And so that's where we're at right now. We're at the cross quarter, which is known as Imbolc, which is the halfway point between solstice and spring equinox. And these cross quarter festivals are known to be primarily a celebration of something in the agricultural year. And of course, our tradition comes from a place where the climate is quite different. Here in Vermont, it was -6 this morning. And so, it's not really the beginning of spring, although there is what is known as a quickening happening. And that quickening is really just that feeling of an increase of light. You can really start to notice the days getting longer and the sun getting a bit stronger, even though we're still in the deep of the cold here. So yeah, it's a quickening time. It's a time when we can start to feel the light within us as well. Somebody posted, I just recorded and shared an Imbolc journey. So if you're interested to explore more of the Druid tradition and how we can celebrate that, going into a magical adventure to meet an ancient tree, as well as the goddess who is associated with this time of year. Her name is Bridget, also known as Breed or Bridie. So yeah, that's where we're at in this time. And oh, thanks for sending that link out, Angela. Yeah, so anyway, blessed Imbolc. I don't know if you had specific questions for me. Am I being interviewed, or do I just sort of wax on?
Yeah, you can just wax on. Yeah, if you want to just tell us like more about a little more about like Dreamland, about everything you do, about the tradition. I think for the most part, most of us are new to this whole school of thought. So it'd be awesome to just get like a once over.
Okay, where to begin? I guess I'll start with how I came to this path. That seems like a good place to begin. So let's see, I have a background in earth sciences and also in organic farming. And it was actually when I was farming that I discovered my pagan roots. And ultimately, a lot of pagan practice is very much based in agricultural reverence and honoring of again, it's that wheel of the year and the different times that are associated with planting and harvesting, and also working with herds. Our ancestors were also keepers of different creatures. And so as I held space with my farm community, I wanted to honor those planting times and those harvesting times, and started having maypole dances at May Day, and started having harvest festivals and tuning into the wheel, basically, and also tuning into the soil and the plants. And of course, they are as tuned in as you can be, really. So they teach us so much. And so it was basically through my farming that I realized that that there was this deeper spirit to what was going on than just, you know, manure and soil and plants. So yeah, so then I came to Vermont in 1999, and there's a lot I could say about all of that, but basically it was at that time when I was at my Saturn return and everything was changing in my life, and I was leaving behind my work as a farmer and starting to become more of a healer and a teacher. And so I landed in this place about a couple miles from where I'm sitting now. I'm actually at the home of a friend because where I live, I have satellite internet and it's very wonky and not very reliable for Zoom things like this. So I'm at a friend's house, but it's still local. It's just a couple miles through the woods. Anyway, so yeah, so I came here in 99 and immediately fell into amazing community. This place is really magical as far as the community of folks that are also very dedicated to the earth and walking spiritual path that is rooted in that way. So became part of various circles, one of which I was in with Angela here, and eventually found my husband, who I actually imported from England. Another whole story unto itself. But he was a druid. His name is Ivan Macbeth. And he was someone that came very strongly into my life, and then literally imported him because he wanted to be in this country anyway. And we fell in love. And we immediately became life as well as business partners and opened the Druid School in 2006. And so we're in our 16th year, which is kind of amazing. And I still say we. Ivan actually passed into spirit in 2016 from a heart attack, but a lot of complicated health issues that led to that point. So he is now an ancestor of our lineage and still very active on the other side. Very connected to me, very connected to the land, and very connected to the students of our school. He's very much still a teacher and a guide. So Ivan's still with us, and so we started the school in 2006. I was already walking sort of an eclectic pagan path at that point, but having met Ivan and really getting a feel and a sense of his path, it was one of those moments maybe you've experienced before, like just of homecoming, of like, oh, this is what I've felt all along. This is totally resonating with who I am, my heart, my soul, everything. And of course, it doesn't help if there's love mixed into the mix, right? So that whole coherence thing. So it all lined up for me. And so we started actually on a friend's land because we didn't have our own place yet, and built a little sort of temporary Druid village on this beautiful big farm out in Orange, Vermont, the home of our dear elder friend, Fred Chayette. And the fall of that same year, we became stewards of this place called Dreamland. And you can see a little bit of it behind me here. That's sunrise just a couple weeks ago. With the stone circle and the hills. That's actually from my front door. That's my view. It's pretty astounding and amazing, and a very special sanctuary. And so that land came to us in a very magical way as well. And it was very clear that it was not just our home, that this is a sanctuary for our community. It's a spiritual center. It's a temple. And it's actually a temple, a sanctuary of 3 temples. So the stone circle here is one of them. There is also a labyrinth, a large stone-lined labyrinth with a circle of hazel burt trees around the outside, which will create a hedge and provide food, so hazelnuts. And then in the woods, we have a faery well. And that's another sort of complementary path that I walk, is as a faery seer. So yeah, so it's a place of 3 temples, and it's a place of lots of forest and a beautiful swimming pond and brooks and lots of magical beings that we coexist with. And so, you know, when I talk about being the chief of, or the director of the Druid School, chief of the Druid Order, Really, it's a triune. It's me, it's Ivan, and it's Dreamland. The three of us work very integrally to do everything together. So when Ivan and I had our marriage ceremony, which in our tradition is called a hand fasting, when you use the word tie the knot, that actually comes from the tradition of hand fasting, where you take hands together and there is a special cord that's wrapped around in order to symbolize that sense of commitment to each other. Anyway, so part of our Druid tradition is that we not only marry each other, we marry the land. And so when Ivan and I had our hand fasting, it was actually a three-way. It was me and Ivan and Dreamland. And so we had 3 rings made. We had a cord that had 3 strands, one representing each of us, that were braided together. And we made vows to each other as well as to the land. And Ivan and I both chose to have ours as earrings rather than finger rings because we work a lot with our hands. You know, I'm still very much a gardener and he is a stone circle builder. So things in our hands get pretty beat up. So the earring is a little safer. And then the 3rd ring during the vows for the land, which we spoke at the pond, which is down below the stone circle, after throwing lots of flowers into the waters, Ivan tore off his Scottish regalia kilt that he was half Scottish. So he was wearing that for the ceremony and dove into the pond to deliver the 3rd ring to the bottom of the pond where it still lives. And so that is the story of our hand fasting and our connection with each other, which is bound through space and time beyond the physical, obviously. So yeah, so the school is based at Dreamland. We also do have a home study course, but you know, the main program that we've always done is actually here on the land because of that reason, because there's so much that is a part of really sinking into this place. The land has so much to offer. We camp out, we stay unplugged from the interwebs and plug into the original web while we're here, the web of life, the web of nature, and really spend a lot of time connecting deeply in community, not just the human community, but the deeper community of all beings that we share this beautiful earth with. Yeah, so like I said, the home study course is there for folks who are further away and can't do this immersive program, which is very embodied. And, you know, we haven't been able to do a lot of embodied things in the last year. In fact, we had to cancel all of our in-person programs this past year, which was very sad. But luckily, we were able to keep going online. And my plan is to open back up in May with the usual programming here at Dreamland. And I'm hopeful. I'm also a manifester. So I'm making that so. And, you know, we have adaptation plans for how to make it safe for folks, including a couple new canopies so that even if it's raining, we can stay outdoors. And we can, have, you know, spaciousness and masks and eat our own food. You know, usually we do organized potlucks on our weekends, and we hope to be able to get back to that at some point. We have a beautiful big yurt with a camp kitchen. And but for now, I think we'll probably be BYO everything just to be safe and stay outside and enjoy nature in all her moods, which you just never know what you're going to get, especially in May. And so it runs from May until October. And so those end points can be a little interesting, slightly raw at times, but you know, that's part of the deal. We have to reconnect ourselves with nature. And sometimes that means wearing a few extra layers or dealing with some annoying bugs or whatever, but there's a lot of beautiful parts of it, of course, as well. So I'm going to pause because that was a whole lot of things and just see if there's any questions or any areas you'd like me to cover that I haven't yet.
I'll ask a quick question and then we can open it up. Could you just say a little bit more about the 3 different, that was awesome, by the way. It's so magical, but could you tell us a little more about the 3 like ceremony areas and what kind of goes on in each area? I'm very
Sure.
intrigued.
Yeah, I can also talk about the 3 grades. I thought you were going to ask about the 3 grades of Druidry, so I can also answer that question if you're
Yeah,
curious about that.
that's awesome.
Okay, so we'll start with the three temples, and you know the number 3 is very sacred for Druids. We do a lot of things in 3s, so it's not an accident that I have 3 temples, and it's not an accident that there are 3 grades. So, so the stone circle is the first one that was built, and that was built when Ivan was alive and kicking, and because that was his thing. He was a master stone circle builder. Built them all over the world, more than 20 full-size circles. His magical name was Stone Bear. He was a big, hulking, very large, strong creature who could lift stones with his pinkies. Yeah, anyway, so he had a deep relationship with the stones and with creating sacred space, and also with dragons. Druids work a lot with the dragons, and in this forum, we're talking specifically about the ways in which these earth currents move and enliven and activate sacred spaces. And so our stone circle is called the Dragon Temple, and it's got 3 ley lines, or also known as dragon lines, moving through it. So it's very highly activated, very powerful space. It's used for ceremony. It's our primary ceremonial space. There's a nice big fire pit in the center. And each of those stones has a very particular alignment. They're you know, the choice of the location of each of them is very conscious, starting with the 4 directions. So, you know, east, west, north, south. And then the ones that are in between, there's 13 in total. So there's a couple stones in between each of those direction stones. And they have different alignments. For example, one aligns to the rising point of the star Sirius. Another one aligns to Capitol Hill in DC. And Ivan, being a, he wasn't a citizen of the US, so he couldn't vote, but he would always say, "That's how I vote." He would just work directly with that alignment and send his intentions and prayers into the Capitol. So, so I'm sure he's still doing that. I'm pretty sure that he's been pretty active actually on that front, in a good way, by the way. Yeah, and then, you know, we have, let's see, we have one that's called the Elf Stone, and that's aligned to our front gate and to honor the nature spirits that live and protect our space. Yeah, so there's a lot of stories, again, behind each of those stones, but they all activate different alignments that connect into the center of the space, and we can open to any of those for any particular purpose in a ceremony. We also use that space for outdoor classroom space. We sit in circles around that fire a lot. And we also use it for dance. So I am an ecstatic dancer, and during the warmer months, we have ecstatic dances around the fire inside the stones there. It's a really amazing thing and wonderful and fun and very therapeutic. I miss dancing in the winter, but you know, I do as much as I can in my living room. So yeah, so that's the Dragon Temple. And then walking down the hill, down a little ways, you come to the what we call the Serpent Temple, which is the Labyrinth, and it's a 7-circuit labyrinth. And a lot of people get labyrinths and mazes confused. So I just want to clarify that a labyrinth is a single circuit pathway that takes you to the center and then back out again. It is not to get you lost, is actually to get you found. So yes, it's an ancient meditation tool. They go back at least as far as the Bronze Age, the 7-circuit labyrinth in particular being one of the very oldest forms. I have actually gotten to visit a place in Cornwall where there are a couple labyrinths that are carved into the side of a stone face cliff that are from the Bronze Age. They're about this big each, and they're one's facing, one's left facing and one's right facing. And so yeah, an ancient meditation tool that also connects in with the earth energies. And the reason it's called a serpent temple is it connects more with the yin energies, more of the watery energies. And in this particular spot where my labyrinth is, there's a lot of underground water. And so it's a very grounding place, very nicely balancing with that uprising energy of the fiery dragons. The labyrinth tends to be more of a solo space where people walk in silence to tune in and to go deep into themselves as well as into the earth. Very grounding. I often encourage students, especially after ceremony or after a weekend of a lot of Druid magic, before getting in their cars, to go walk the labyrinth to ground themselves. So there's that. And then the third one is the fairy temple, or the fairy well. It is actually a well. It's a stone-lined well that is probably colonial as far as the stone structural pieces of it. It's been on the land for at least a couple hundred years, probably longer. And it's now in a forest, but back when it was in use, it was an open pasture land. You know, a lot of Vermont was open farm about a couple hundred years ago. It's mostly reforested now. And but there's this ancient standing dead birch tree right to the side of it, which would have been like the shade tree over the well. Yeah, and so we have worked with that space, done a bunch more stone work. There's a circle, like a low stone wall around that, as well as 4 directional pathways and standing stones in the directions as well. And so that is worked with as a very intentional portal into the realm of fairy, which is down into the earth. You'll notice a theme here. I'm very earthy. It's all about going down with your roots. So yes, so it's connecting with the fair folk. They're the original ancestors of this earth. They're ancient beings. And again, I like to sort of clarify, because, you know, a lot of our media culture shows fairies like these pretty little girls with wings that flit around, and they're kind of little. No, that's not what I'm talking about. that, you know, they can show up that way because they can morph into anything in order to sort of help you to be able to connect with them. Kind of like one of my teachers, my fairy teacher, says, they go into the drag closet of your mind and put something on that you can relate to. But if they showed themselves truly, they are not tiny. They are not necessarily pretty, although they can be extremely awesome and powerful. And some of them are very friendly to humans, others are not, for good reason. We don't have a great reputation as a human species when it comes to nature, and these are the beings that protect nature. So we work with them. We work to rebuild those relationships. We work with them to also co-create, because there's awesome things that we can do together. And so, yeah, that's a place that's a smaller space. It tends to be smaller circles. And again, very much for introspective, deep connection with the living earth and the beings who abide there. Yeah, so those are the 3 temples. I also want to mention that I have a sweet little retreat cabin that's on Hip Camp. If anybody wants to come and have their own little private retreat at Dreamland, you're very invited. And I keep it open. So far, I'm keeping it open this winter. Sometimes I close it down for a couple months because I don't plow my driveway. And so staying at my place involves hiking in and out. And taking your stuff in on a cargo sled. We have about 2 feet of snow right now. So yeah, so it's a little rustic, but it's cozy and warm when you get to the location of the cottage. So yeah, so is it okay if I jump into the 3 grades?
Yeah, perfect. That was great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna take another sip of my tea.
By the way, when you said that Ivan was still with us, I got like overwhelming goosebumps, which is pretty cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I called him in before we started. He's here.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'll just say that Druidry is a tradition that comes from the British Isles, the Celtic lands. Celtic. I use quotes because there is no one kind of Celt. It's actually a big melting pot of many different tribes and different languages, different parts of Europe. And so, so when we talk about Celtic, I always want to acknowledge that this is actually quite a diverse group of different kinds of people that moved around the Western European area. And so Druidry is the native indigenous spirituality. It is one of the native indigenous spiritualities of the British Isles. It is very old. And it was primarily an oral tradition, meaning that people who studied did not get their information in any kind of written form. So it all had to be memorized. And it took up to 20 years to become a druid. It was not a small endeavor by any means, but consider also that that training was kind of like meshed in with what we would consider like elementary and high school. And so all of that would have been happening at the same time, the spiritual as well as sort of the more practical. But it wasn't anybody, you know, you had to, not everybody was a druid. Sometimes it was passed down through family lines, or sometimes it was a person that would have just shown certain gifts and proclivities and be sort of handed off to the local druid mentors to learn, to be taught. And so anyway, modern Druidry, as we teach it, is a little bit of an eclectic mix of what we can gather from our understanding of something that was mostly lost, honestly. The Romans basically did in the Druids, right around the turn of the, right around, let's see, it was around 50 or 60 AD. So very early on in this era, the Romans made sure to get rid of the Druids, because the Druids were very powerful part of society. They were the spiritual leaders. They were also the judges. They were basically the peacekeepers. They were the astrologers, the healers, the diviners. They held many important roles, and in that Celtic society, they were really revered. And you know, most kings and queens had their own personal druid sort of advisor that would support them in all of the important decisions that they had to make. And so druids were very important in that society. And so when the Romans came, they were clear that, you know, if they wanted to take over, they had to get rid of the druids, because the druids wouldn't have it. And so they were basically decimated pretty quickly. Any residual tradition or humans that still held those memories and those teachings had to go very much underground. And luckily, some of them did manage to live and pass those wisdoms on, but a lot of it was lost. A vast majority was lost to our thinking brains, at least, you know. And I'm a believer in the spirit of Druidry being very strong and never dying, and that ultimately our ancestors learned much of what they knew from the natural world, and that we can still learn, and the trees can still speak to us and teach us, the land, the serpents, the dragons, the stones, you know, all of the spirits of nature can still speak to us and teach us about what it means to be a druid. And so really for us, it's a lot about like honoring the ancestral lineages as much as we can gather and learn and know of what our ancestors did, but also really paying attention to what does it mean to be a druid today? What does the spirit of Druidry want to express through us today? And for me, because it's such a land and earth-based tradition, it's a lot about listening to the beings that I live with here. You know, what are the trees that are in this Vermont landscape, and what do they have to say to me? And what are, you know, what does this local landscape spirit speak when it's listened to? And, you know, what is this mountain chain? What is its energy? And what does it have to say? What's its creation story? And that's where we also intersect with the indigenous wisdom of the land and the peoples that are of this place, you know. And so this is something that we have to continually pay honor to and acknowledge the fact that, you know, this land was stolen from the indigenous people of this place. And we have to continue to listen to those people and those stories and acknowledge that, you know, we are here because of colonization. And that's a deep wound that needs to continue to be healed. And to acknowledge that not only did a lot of genocide and pain happen to those original people, but that they're also still here and they need to have rights and be acknowledged, and to have the basics of their own survival supported and acknowledgement of their identity. So you can hear in my words that I also have a strong feeling of not only peace, but justice, and the importance that, like our traditional role as Druids as being very much about protecting justice for all people, and also how we can be that today in this land and in this place, and listening to the peoples and the beings of nature. So with that intro, there are three grades. It starts with Bard, and then it goes on to Ovate, and then finally to Druid. So that's the sequence that we work with. And I also just want to acknowledge that Ivan, when he was trained as a Druid in England, where he was from, he trained with an organization called OBOD, which stands for the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And so, so our school is sort of like a granddaughter of their school. They are the largest Druid order in the world. They don't have a residential program like we do. They're very much a correspondence course, but they're great. And so, so Ivan came from OBOD, and so that's been a strong influence in the way that we've opened and developed our own teachings. But then there's been a lot of other streams and influences and teachings that both Ivan and I have added to it from our own life experiences and trainings as well. And so, yeah, so the Bard, many of us know that word and probably have some associations already with what a Bard is, right? So you might think of like the court musician, somebody who sings or plays instruments or shares stories or poetry. And that's very much, it's very much about the creative spirit. And yeah, there's a Welsh word called awen, A-W-E-N. So a lot of people, when they say amen, I say awen. Awen is the Welsh word, which means the spirit of inspiration. And so it's through that spirit of inspiration that we are able to be creators. And creators can be story, song, poem, music. It could be dance. It could be creating sacred space. It could be art of some kind. So there's lots of different ways creativity can move through us. And that bardic ability to create is really seen as sacred. And, you know, Ivan would say, well, what do the gods and goddesses do? They create. So of course it's sacred. So they can also destroy, and so can we. And so, you know, really acknowledging that power of creativity and the power of destruction, because sometimes both are needed. It's not all about the creative side. That would be imbalanced, you know, so we also have to learn the power of destruction, not in a negative or painful or hurtful way, but the power of allowing things to go back down into the earth and compost. You could also think of it as dismemberment or decomposition. A lot of the good D words for that one. So anyway, so creativity is a big part of the Bardic year. We spend time every weekend that we're together with a Bardic circle, also known as an Eisteddfod, another Welsh word, which basically just means a Bardic circle, where everyone has something they've come prepared to present. And each person chooses their own special Bardic art that they really develop. So for example, like you maybe have wanted to learn how to play guitar for a long time. Well, that is your opportunity to like pick it up and come each month with a song that you're ready to play. And it doesn't mean that you're good. You could be really bad. We're still going to give you a standing ovation. It's all about just pushing your boundaries and stretching beyond what you thought was possible, not perfection by any means. We work a lot with the quality of impeccability, and impeccability is not the same as perfection. Impeccability is about doing the best with what you have and really stepping in with both feet to show up fully in the best part of yourself. So anyway, so that's the Bardic. We do a lot of foundational basics of like how to open and close sacred ceremony together. We create ceremony at least once a weekend, and everyone gets a chance to take part in the different roles that are played in the creation and then the dismantling of that sacred space around our ceremonies. And then we also work a lot with the elements, and that is, you know, the earth, the fire, the water, and the air. And so we delve deeply into one of those elements on each of those weekends, and also the binding element of spirit that holds it all together. So we connect in with those. They're kind of like the building blocks of nature. And but more than just blocks, obviously, they are beings and they are energies and they are life force. So yeah, so that's bardic year. And we also do a lot of journeying, which is a little bit more active than meditation. It's understood to be a way where you actually go on an adventure. Like your physical body stays put, your soul goes. It's seen as astral travel. It's seen as flying. You know, when you think about witches on broomsticks, that's actually a metaphor for what happens when we journey. We go and explore other realms and other lands. And so we do a lot of that. We build an inner sanctuary from which we do our traveling. Yeah, so that's Bard grade in a nutshell. Ovate grade, so each of these lasts about a year if you do this in-person course. If you do it on home study version, it's basically self-paced. You can spend 5 years as a Bard and that's fine, or you can spend a year depending on how motivated and dedicated and how much time you have actually. So ovate grade, so if the bardic grade is very much about sort of opening up to a like-minded circle of humans and nature and sort of opening your heart, there's a lot of energy around creativity and also the magical child. The ovate grade sort of goes deeper into the shadows. Tends to be a little bit more of a solitary inside exploration process. The ovate grade is a lot of people's favorite because it is very intensive and immersive in the sense of people go through a lot and they change a lot. Very transformative. And so it has to do a lot with shadow work. It has a lot to do with like really looking deep at who we are and what we've taken on and making choices about what works and what's draining us in our lives, getting very, very clear, looking closely in the mirror at ourselves. And yeah, there's a bunch of initiations that support us in really shifting state, including a shamanic death ceremony, which is kind of the culmination of ovate year, where we literally dig our graves and get in them and spend the night in the earth in order to completely decompose who we've been and come out anew. So it's like the Druid version of rebirth. Yeah, we walk on fire the next weekend after that, because what do you do when you've got a new life and full power and freedom? You walk on fire just to make sure you're fully on board with the fact that you can do anything. So yeah, it's powerful experience. The metaphor of ovate grade is the chrysalis. Also the spiritual, the hunter. The hunter is an animal of any kind that you work with that has the ability to go after its prey, and the ability, and the metaphor here is about going after, really hunting for our own power and for the things that drain us of that. So yeah, it's potent stuff. And the chrysalis being that metaphor of really starting to completely transform what we've been as a caterpillar, and eventually at the beginning of Druid grade, coming out of that chrysalis as a being with wings. We don't necessarily impose the fact that it's got to be a butterfly. It could be a dragon. It could be anything, but you have wings. You come out with wings. So third year is having done all of that deep transformative work and really gotten clear about who you are and some of your gifts, and hopefully releasing some of the heavy shadowy stuff that has kept you limited or stuck or blocked or whatever it may be, in pain. The Druid grade is when we start to really practice stepping into our empowerment. And part of how we do that is we actually have the first and third year students on the same weekend. So the bards and the druids share weekends, and that way the druids can be mentors and guides to the bards. They're practicing how to hold ceremony. They're practicing how to teach. They're practicing how to walk their talk, to be role models, to be mentors. And so they get lots of opportunities to do that on the weekends, but they also very much learn about what it means to be in service to something larger than themselves. So even though we might feel empowered, it's not about just me empowered for my own sake. It's about how do I now take that out and share it with the larger world. And so each druid chooses a service project, a leadership project where they find some way to give back. And it's not about something you get paid for. It's really truly in service, voluntary, and something that you can do regularly to really show yourself and show your community that you have something to offer. Druid year is also when we get into geomancy and working with building temples, working with the earth energies and meridians of the land, learning how to douse and divine those things and work with them. Earth healing is a part of that as well. There's lots of places that need our support and healing. And then the divine is the third big, I mean, the divine is throughout the whole thing in different ways, but in the Druid year, each student is chosen. I don't think the student chooses a god or goddess. It's really the other way around. A divine being chooses each individual druid, and we don't limit it to the Celtic pantheon either. You know, there are plenty of other beings out there that sometimes a person is connecting to, whether it's through their own blood lineage or through soul lineage or some other way, spiritual lineage, that these beings choose us. And then we work very intimately and strongly to connect with that being until finally the culminating ceremony with the druid grade is actually channeling the divine for the bards, becoming a god or a goddess for a couple of hours, and then speaking from that place to the first year students, offering your divine gifts. It's awesome. Completely and totally awesome in all senses of that word. Yeah, so that is the 3 years in a nutshell. There's so much more, of course, but hopefully it gives you a flavor.
Wow. Oh my gosh. What an incredible program. I just want to say thank you so much for passing this culture down and like holding that space. I can't believe it. That's just like such a well-rounded, incredible program that I hope, you know, so many people actually go through. So I hope some of our group members will look into it. I'm definitely going to. That just blew my mind. But what we'll do now is we'll open it up for questions from our group. So Angela, if you see anyone with their hand up, do you mind just letting me know? Oh, Angela has a question. So perfect.
Yep.
Go ahead, bud.
Yes, and I will look for everybody else. Yes, thank you so much, Fearn. Thank you so much for coming. And can we meet up again? Because just listening to you, just hearing you, like I've got 8 million things I want to just reminisce about, things that we, you know, real quick, was Ivan like 6'2" or 6'1"?
He was 6'4".
6'4". So I have a recollection of us all getting dressed up in this giant group and going to see those Harry Potter movies in Williston. And
Yes.
he had this grizzly kind of white hair, and he was huge, and he wore this vest with like no shirt, and we were at a movie theater in, you know, Little Vermont, and you know, and we're all like, woo! Oh, it was he was a force of nature. Oh my goodness. But I have lots of things. I would love to connect with you again. So I guess if I was to ask a specific question of you, Ivan, and Dreamland, I have started a Wheel of the Year journey. I started at the solstice in December, at the winter solstice, and I'm celebrating them. I'm doing each moon cycle and the Wheel of the Year holidays. I've been studying this stuff now for about 23 years, and this will be the first time I think that I've consciously done a year. I marvel at my ability to take so long to learn things, but that's okay. I'm not judging myself. I'm just saying. So I'm about to celebrate Imbolc, you know, and so opening myself to, you know, your wisdom and Ivan's and Dreamland and my own, and combining them all together. I wonder if you would have any message for me, any ideas of how I could, I do have some ideas about what I'm going to do for the ceremony already. And maybe if there's any message you have for me that was something I could include that might help me on my journey or be really powerful, I would greatly appreciate that.
Sure. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the journey yet that I shared.
Yeah, but I will.
Yeah, so that certainly, that, you know, the reason I've been starting to do these journeys at each of the points in the wheel is because I'm used to coming together in ceremony, you know, in the body with my circle of druids to do these things. And, you know, we haven't been able to do that. And so it's like, all right, how can I support people in making a connection here when we can't? And, you know, the wonderful thing, even though it's sad to not be able to be in circle together, the wonderful thing about this opportunity is that it makes it accessible to way more people that couldn't normally even have made it to Dreamland for various reasons. And so, so yeah, that journey is a way to connect in with the energies of this time. And, you know, for me, I work a lot with her flame and with Bridget's flame. And there is a tradition of flame keepers that goes way back to Ireland. And Ivan, actually, when he came over to this country, he came carrying Bridget's flame, not literally like lit, although certainly lit in his heart. But there is a tradition of, you know, always having a candle that's lit off another candle that was lit off another candle that goes all the way back to her eternal fire in Kildare, Ireland. And so we still have that. We have the candles that are Bridget's candles specifically that we work with. And so we always light those at this time and really call her in. You know, like, I feel like she's always there in my heart anyway. But lighting the candle is kind of like another way to just really activate her presence in your life, especially if you have that Bridget's flame. And ultimately, you know, doing that journey is a way of accessing that. Even though you might not have that physical candle, you can still access her flame because she's there all the time. It's kind of like that whole spirit of Druidry is never going to be dead. It's never going to be killed, even though the Romans think they were successful at that. So, yeah, so Bridget, even though you might not have a physical candle that has been lit by another candle all the way back through time, you can access her right in your heart. And so I would do that. I would like get yourself a special candle for Imbolc and make sure that that's your special Bridget candle. You use it for that purpose. And then do that journey. And then when you come out of that journey, light that candle from your heart. And then you know you've got her there with you. Whenever that candle is burning, you can connect more directly with her.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. That's a great
Mhm.
suggestion. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Fearn. Who else has questions? You just throw your hand up or raise your Zoom hand. Either way is fine. And if you guys see anybody that has a question, let me know. Oh, perfect. Kristen.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so like inspirational, and I can't wait till like COVID restrictions lift because I'll totally travel up to Vermont and experience your beautiful place. It sounds so magical. My question, I love how you introduce yourself as like a fairy seer, and I'm just really curious about how fairy magic presents itself to you. Like how do you see it? How do you experience it? And is that something that, you know, everyone sees the same way, or is it different?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, when it comes to all of the intuitive arts, working with the spirit world, which is, you know, beyond our physical form, the way I always explain that is that each person is going to have their own way in. And for some, it's very visual. Actually, it's not for me. So like, you know, the expression is fairy seer, but I often joke and say I'm a fairy feeler because for me, it's more through my senses of, I mean, sometimes I get imagery, but more often it's like a felt sense that I have that I know is beyond just me and my body in that moment. Sometimes it also comes through words, and that's true for a lot of people. You'll actually get like instructions or words, or sometimes with the fairy folk, they also inspire a lot of creativity, and people who are really connected in, sometimes like they'll just download poetry and songs. There are stories of old Irish musicians that were totally just playing fairy music, you know, because they were tapped in and they would go to the special fairy mound and they knew where to go to get their creativity, you know, like the whole idea of the muse. Well, the muse really is a fairy being. So yeah, so finding your way in, you know, and they will also, if you reach out, they will work with that access point for you, you know, so, and also finding the places that feel the way my teacher, so my fairy teacher is Orion Foxwood, and he's a dear friend and mentor of mine who has written several books on this, and you can look up his work if you're interested. But you can go to a place that feels liminal. And we all know places like that. You know, they could be right in your backyard, but they could be a special spot that you maybe have to drive a little bit to get to. But go to a place that feels like it's in between the worlds, and go to that place with an offering. Traditional fairy offerings are things like milk and honey, mead. They love the honey. And especially things that you've made with your own hands and heart, you know, something that's like got your energy and your love built into it. Bring that as an offering and just reach out your heart and say, hi, I'm here and I want to connect with you. And please show me the way to open so that I can hear or see or sense you in some way, you know. And then just, you know, build a practice. It's a lot like relationship. If we keep showing up, they'll keep showing up. If we just show up once in a while and then forget about them for a year, yeah, you're probably not going to have great success.
Very cool. Thank you. Can I tell you a really quick, awesome fairy story?
Sure.
So I love fairy magic and I feel it all around me. And sometimes like I'll see little like sparkling lights around people. And I was making all of these fairy doors at one time. I just felt inspired to make them out of clay. I was just working with clay and I was making these doors and I was just having fun with it. Like I didn't really think that they were, you know, like I like the idea that fairies could travel through them, but it was just creation for me. And I was living in an apartment above my mother-in-law at the time. She comes upstairs one day and she's like, you know, I had the craziest dream last night. She goes, there was all these little doors everywhere. And she goes, these colorful lights were just flying through the doors and they were all over the house. And it was interesting because she's not really into a lot of this stuff, or she wasn't at the time. And I just happened to like look over at my craft table and show her all these doors that I'd made. So ever since that point, I realized like this is real. This is not, you know, like there's these other energies really work within our world, and if we're open to them, they'll engage with us. And it's just been very cool. I know that my daughter carries like fairy magic like you almost like wouldn't believe. She's such a trickster and she loves like little shiny trinkets and anything glittery, and she's always like taking things and hiding. She's over there going but yeah, it's just so amazing. So thank you so much. That was really really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kristen. That was awesome. I see Greg's hand up.
Hi, Fearn. I've been your stalker for the week. Oh, I feel like I know you now. I've been into the book and I've been checking out your YouTube videos, and I woke to found another video from you this morning. And was it your intention to have that reflection of the fire being on that tree? I don't even know if you noticed it, but I was like, wow, the bush is burning. The bush is burning in the field. And I'm like, that's crazy. But I don't know where all this is taking me, but I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad for Cal inviting you. I've already invited myself to Cal Boyd's house to sleep on his floor to come visit you. and you don't even know me yet, but I just have a long dream. You know, I would have said I was more bardic than druid, because I guess I thought druid was the power guy, and I long to have no power, really, to tell you the truth. I want to be a poetic. I fancy myself a poetic healer, and I long to make the song to sing the earth and humanity back to health, and us all to sing in a circle. You know, I'm going to start crying now, but I long for that, and I don't know where it's coming, where it's coming from or where it's coming to, but I'm grateful that you're here with us. And I guess my question, where I had a question in mind, because I didn't have a question in mind when I started babbling last time I was on here, but how much of the book was written, the Bardic Book of Becoming? How much of it was you? And it seems like it's so much more Ivan. I think I hear his voice all the way through more than yours.
Yeah, that's true. Nice to meet you, Greg. That is true that Ivan primarily was the writer of that book. He wrote it in the last year of his life. thank goodness he at least got one done. He was hoping to do a trilogy, one for each of the 3 grades, but then he passed. And so yes, it was primarily him. He was a prolific writer, which is a wonderful thing, because all of that stuff that he downloaded onto the written word is now still with us. And so yeah, much of the curriculum of the Druid training that we offer is from his writings. And I obviously am the main teacher, and I teach some of what he wrote, but I also teach a lot of my own stuff. I'm less inclined to sit down and write, although I know I need to do more of that. I tend to be more of an active person than like sitting at a laptop writing. It's harder for me to stay focused long enough to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, so he wrote primarily that book. I did a lot of editing, and I wrote the intro, one of the intros. There's a couple intros in that book, a little story about how we met, which is kind of a funny one. And yeah, and I did know about the reflection of my wood stove on the door. That's something that is a fun little magical effect that happens because my stove was burning really hot, and I have a glass door, so it was shining through and then reflecting off of the glass in the other door and then out into the woods. Yeah, so you know, another thing about Bridget is she's the goddess of the hearth, and so she's related primarily to the element of fire, but also water. She's very much a connecting force with the sacred healing waters and the holy wells and in the land, so the earth too. Anyway, so hopefully that answers your question. And I want to mention also power. You know, like there is a lot of interesting and obviously different interpretations of what power means. And when I speak about power, especially in the Druid sense of power, it's not power over anything. Certainly we have the ability to focus and direct our will, and that is something that we teach our students to do. And but we're always doing that with a really strong ethic about if it harms none. You know, we as humans are constantly, like I was saying, we're constantly creating and destroying, and that is power. That is something that we have already that we are wielding, sometimes very unconsciously. And so it's really about becoming more conscious about the power that we already have. And, you know, and I could say a whole bunch about what that means as a white person in this culture. But that's a whole other soapbox that I could get into. But, you know, like, how do we take the power that we have and use it for good? How do we take that power and use it collectively? You know, this group is all about collectiveness. And so collective power, and that's like power with, and that's also power from within, not power over. So, so power is ultimately just the ability to act. And we are all acting, we are all creating, we are all destroying with every word, with every thought. And it's all about becoming more and more conscious and aware of how we use those powers for the highest good and the deepest good of all beings. So there you have it.
Thank you, Fearn. Thank you, Greg. I do have a spare bedroom for you, my brother. So do we have any other questions? I think we have time for one more, if anyone feels up for it. No. Angela, do you see anybody? All right. Joe, did you have a, yeah, there we go. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll try.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me? I don't know how good my internet is right now. It's been a wild meeting. I'm grateful though that I've been able to hear everything, but I've not been able to see many people's faces. And if it's frozen, it's been frozen in a lot of funny places. So if everybody can hear me, that's cool. Cool.
Yeah, we can hear you, man. Yeah, you're good. You're coming in good.
All right, beautiful. Fearn, thank you so much. There's something in me. I'm literally writing as you're talking. There's, like Greg, there's some, it's always been there since I was young. There's this connection to Mother Earth. There's this understanding that there's a connection and a knowledge that comes from her that we don't have to think much about it. We try to think about it, and it seems like it, we, like you said, the fairies understand that we may not do the best things to this beautiful place. And I see that deeply. And I also, like, I have compassion for it because I don't think it's necessarily purposeful. And I feel like the whole world is kind of a bunch of big kids that haven't been trained well, and I think that's starting to happen now, is that there are people that are like yourself that have this ancient wisdom that is these old souls that are here to be like, okay, it's time to wrangle the kids in and try to figure this out. and try to like, let's stop the madness and like maybe clean up the bedrooms and start utilizing things a little bit more efficiently. I mean, I guess it's not so much as a question, but it, like Greg, I feel drawn to this. Like it feels like whether it's a practice, a religion, a group, the word druid, like we had someone on last week that talked a lot about connections with Mother Earth. I just feel this deep connection. Is there a way that I can hear? Is there a reason to think that I should go a direction with one practice or another? Or should I kind of be very much like a whatever works for me type of thing? I guess that's the type of question. Whatever comes to me and I can use as a Mother Earth's medicine. That's my question.
Well, obviously you're asking a little bit of a biased person about whether you should follow this path.
That's true.
So I'll just say that. But I think, you know, dabbling can only get you so far. And so whatever you choose, go in deep, you know, go in with both feet, experience all of what it offers, try it all on, see what works, practice, integrate. And yeah. And, you know, like ultimately we can spin out with confusion and uncertainty in our heads, but your heart knows. So listen to your heart.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for this, because I feel like a lot of people on here learned some stuff today, at least for myself. Like this is a lot of, it resonates deeply, and I've heard the word, and I've like know what, like just known druid, but I've never known the depths of this, and it resonated with me like in like a vibration. So thank you, Angela, for bringing Fearn on. Thank you for this, Fearn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Fearn, and thank you, Angela, for introducing us to Fearn. What we do, sorry, I have a little cold. What we do to close each meeting is we send up a prayer to all those awakening at this time, and so Kristen reads that for us. Whenever you're ready, Kristen.
I've also put our links, all of our links, how to our Facebook, our YouTube, and our direct email if anybody wants to contact us further.
Awesome. And just so everyone here knows, next Sunday we're at 8 at night instead of in the morning. We have somebody coming from New Mexico to speak, so that'll be great.
All right. So thank you guys all for showing up today and for speaking and sharing. It was a beautiful meeting. And what we do with all of that collective energy and that connection to spirit is we dedicate the merit of this meeting to all of those who are awakening at this precious time. May our efforts to better ourselves help shift planetary consciousness from fear into love. May this energy ripple out into the world and awaken those with closed hearts, illuminate closed minds, and inspire all to live within the presence of compassion and generosity.
Thank you all. Fearn, I'll see you in May. I'll be up there. Can't wait.
Thank you so much, Fearn, and thank you, everyone. What a wonderful meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
I love you all. Peace out, everybody.